All right, so I would like to talk a little bit about intonation and how intonation we tend to think of as something that we need to do with the body. It's like we have to use the body to adjust and manipulate to get things just right to produce a sound on the pitch that we want. And as a violinist, of course, I was trained to look at where my fingers are going on the, when I was little, I had little tapes. I have to, put the finger on the right tapes. And there's a lot of doing to get things in tune. So sure, you kind of have to learn that way from the beginning. However, we learn to play in tune, I think, usually with too much tension because of that over focusing and over concentrating. And we over prioritize the intonation. It's like we make that more important than the actual music we're making. And when we're in school, as kids, teenagers, and then some of us in music school, in college, at a conservatory, a big part of our training is about getting things in tune, getting them right. And we are taught this is how you get things in tune. And it's all about what we're doing with the body. So a couple things here. You have to realize that you're making music up here first, the source of the music, actually up here and here, head and heart. And to be really clear, it's head, heart, and whole body. The whole body is making the music. But I think it really starts in an idea. So you need to be able to hear the pitches that you want. I mean, a child who's starting out doesn't even know what a note in tune sounds like. It's like they don't even know if a C is flat or sharp. You kind of have to train. We talk about training the ear. Well, we're actually training the mind, not the ear. We're training our mind to discern if something is on pitch or off. So sure, you have to start there, but it's here. It's not out here. What's happening out here is an effect of what's happening here. If you can't hear it in tune, you can't sing it in tune. If you can't hear it and sing it, well, you don't have to be able to sing something in tune unless you're a singer. But I think I learned a lot from the Indian classical music system when I took just two lessons of Indian classical violin. And then it just was, I didn't have the time to put into it to really be serious about it. So I stopped, but I learned so many, well, not many, but some really, really important things in those two lessons. And one of them is that Indian classical musicians aren't even allowed to play their musical instrument until they have learned how to sing first. And again, you can't sing in tune if you can't have a mental idea of it, hear it internally in tune. So you have the idea here, and then we get out of the way with constructive thinking and allowing the easing to happen so that the idea can be easily and clearly and accurately expressed through the mind, body, musculature, nervous system self to produce what has to happen mechanically to create that sound that is reflecting the idea. You want it to line up. You want your idea and the reality to be aligned. Okay, so that's the first thing, to be really clear that you are making the music up here and this is an effect. If the sound coming out is out of tune, it's not about changing what's happening here first. It's about being really clear on assessing what happened. And you're kind of comparing it to your internal idea. It's like I play a note, like, ooh, that was sharp. That means my second finger was too high. And that means that the next time I play it, I want my second finger to be a little lower. Now this happens super fast if you've already been playing for a while, super slow if you're a beginner. But you kind of have to go through that process. You start here, you do an experiment, you try it, you find out, oh, it was sharp, and this is what needs to happen. So you then put in the next programming of your brain, lower second finger, right? Then you get out of the way again and you trust your system to produce a sound that is closer to what you had in mind. Stop, think, play, right? So you do that process and you learn how to create an effect that's aligned with your intention, the cause of here. And so that's the process of learning how to play in tune. Then we interfere with the process endlessly. And we do that, it is a self-sabotage thing that we do. We have habitual ways of thinking, especially self-critical, and end gaining is what it all comes down to, where we care more about the outcome. We care more about getting the note in tune than about the well-being of ourself, about the primary concern. What's happening to me now as I am doing, playing this note? What's happening to me now as I hear that it's out of tune? What's happening to me now as I'm worried about my upcoming performance and what are people going to think about me, and I can't play in tune, and I've been practicing this section for 3 weeks and it's still out of tune and I'm a failure. And this kind of thinking makes us tight. When you're tight, your musculature contracts. When your hand is contracted, your fingers are going to be at a different distance. And this is the same for vocal folds, vocal mechanism. Like, it's not just about fingers. Your musculature changes because of overall tension. And so then whatever you practiced is going to change if you were relying on a distance, right? So to become more consistent with your intonation, you have to have a reliable process. And you need to infuse it with ease so that your muscles and your system is at its optimum flexibility. And you're also adaptable and responsive to exactly what's happening in the moment. So if you're singing or you're playing a note and immediately you hear that it's a little off, you can immediately adjust with ease. And then it's not an issue, because for a split second that nobody but you heard, it was out of tune. Big deal. You fixed it and nobody even noticed. That's how great musicians do it. It's not like they can hit every note squarely, perfectly in tune at the beginning of every note every time. Nobody can do that. There are people that are much better at it, but most of the time people just, they start and they adjust immediately and they correct it. And it happens so fast, they're not aware of it and the audience isn't even aware of it, but it's the mechanism that happens when you are in that state of relative ease and flow. Okay, so I want to just talk about one more thing, which is a little story, which really made it obvious to me that this is all true, that this is the reality. So I had a student once. I'm going to say her name was Molly. Her name wasn't Molly, but let's just call her Molly. So Molly was and is a really good violinist, and she was doing her master's, I think, at the time. Now she's already completed her doctorate and she's teaching. But at the time, I think she was in the process of doing her master's, and she had a master's recital coming up within a few days. And she was supposed to play the Sibelius violin concerto. And she came to me she was my student, and she came to me for a lesson in tears. And she was so distraught because she said, I've been working on this Sibelius for so long, and I've been working so hard on my intonation. And every time I go into my violin lesson with my violin teacher, he picks on my intonation, and that's the only thing we ever talk about is my intonation. He told me I'm not allowed to make music or do anything until I have fixed my intonation, that nothing else matters So I have been focusing only on intonation, and I've been practicing for hours, and it just keeps getting worse, and I don't know what to do, and I have to perform this in 3 days or whatever. And she's in tears. So what do I do? And I'm telling you, I've recorded everything ever since, because I would give thousands of dollars to get the video of that lesson. And I was not recording things yet at that time. And like, oh, because it was such a great indicator, like a great example of what I'm going to tell you. So first and foremost, I'm there to support and, my student, and help her feel better. So, as if you're feeling hard on yourself and, you're distraught like that, you're full of tension, and anything you do is not going to work. So first thing I had to do was to help her start thinking differently. I had to help her forget about her intonation. And so I talked to her the way I usually do and helped her remind her why she is playing the violin, getting her in touch with why she's doing a master's, why she's a musician, how much she loves it. And actually in that moment, I even got out my violin. I played the opening of the Sibelius Violin Concerto for her. It was far from perfect because I hadn't practiced it in probably 10 years or something, but I remember how to play the beginning. So I played the beginning for her, so she got to just listen, and I helped her get into a different paradigm where the music was important. So I said, for just now, let's do an experiment. I want you to, we probably did some etudes also, and constructive thinking and whatever else I did. I don't remember, it was a long time ago. But the point is, I did get her to the point where she completely forgot about intonation. And I had her play it again. Oh, I forgot to say, she played it the first time. She played for me. I'm like, okay, well, it can't be, I'm thinking to myself, well, it can't be that bad. And so at the beginning of the lesson, after she told me the story, I said, well, why don't you just play it and we'll see what happens. And I was thinking, well, let's just work on that. But she played it, and the truth is her intonation was horrendous. It was really bad. It was really out of tune. I didn't tell her that, obviously, but it was really out of tune. And it would not have helped to work on the intonation, because she had been working on intonation for days and weeks and months and nothing else. But just so you know, the background was it sounded really out of tune. So then I did all the work with her and got her to forget about the intonation. And then she also got happier. She was reconnected with why she is doing a master's, the love of music. I played for her. She really enjoyed it. She loves the Sibelius Violin Concerto. So finally, she's in a completely different state. And I said, okay, well, why don't you just play it again and think about these things that we just talked about, right? Which had nothing to do with intonation. That was no longer in our lesson. It was out the window and gone. So she played it again, and I'm telling you, I've never heard such a dramatic transformation in this realm, right? She played the Sibelius Violin Concerto, and it was so in tune. The whole thing she did was in tune. Maybe there was one note or something, but she played it beautifully. She was making music, and it was in tune. And it was like a miracle because it was so bad before. And all of the intonation problems were fixed. And she couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it because I'd never seen anything like that. I totally was not expecting that to happen. But it was great for her. She felt confident. She went and did her recital or her jury or whatever it was. And for me, I will never forget that intonation is not about working out here on your fingers. And I think it's criminal how her teacher had her over focusing on intonation and even told her, you're not allowed to do anything else until you have fixed your intonation problem. He said, you're not allowed to make music. All you can do now is conquer this and fix your intonation problem. That was the worst possible advice she could have ever gotten. But she loved her teacher, even after that. she thought he was great and she was going to do anything her teacher told her to do. So I just was really happy that she was also working with me and listened to me and decided to try doing something different. And she got a completely different result. So intonation is not, yes, there are the mechanics, but you have to learn it with ease. That's the one thing. Talked about that from the beginning. If you learn it with ease from the beginning, you won't have intonation problems. And if you're doing it from here, not out here, this is the cause, this is the effect. And then you've got to work with the thoughts, the doubt monsters, the negative thoughts that will get in the way and cause your use, the standard of your use to go down. You're going to have increased muscular tension, and that's going to alter your body. It's going to alter the instrument so that you're no longer, you don't have the same body to make music with. It's a different body. So it's not going to work the same way. You don't have a clear system, a clear channel to take your idea out into sound. You got to clear the gut out of the way, the negative thinking, the self-criticism, and above all, the end gaming, which is what it all is. So that is, it's just sad for me to see the overemphasis on the mechanics of intonation. And when we prioritize it so much that it's at the expense of the actual music that we're making. And last but not least, people can perform and have some notes out of tune, but if they're playing from their hearts and they're loving what they're doing and they connect with the audience, and the audience is connected, and it's like the whole spirit of the music making is rich and light and free and flexible and gorgeous, or ugly if it needs to be, but you're really connecting. It doesn't matter if you've got a few notes here and there that are out of tune, or even more than a few, because it's so much more important, the whole. And all we really want is to move and be moved. And you can be moved by an out of tune performance just as much as an in tune performance, and even more if the person playing the in tune performance isn't integrated and isn't playing with their whole self and their heart's not in it, and then it's not they're not communicating their who they are in the way that we can. So that's what I had to say today on intonation, and hopefully this was useful, and that's it. I'm going to stop the recording now.